Okay, so let's get a weight on this pen. 33.64 grams. That is a solid piece of metal right there. Hello all, it's Addie from Whimsy of Things here. Welcome to my first fountain pen review video. Today I'm going to review this Gravitas stainless steel pocket fountain pen in a gunmetal finish. This pen retails for 105 euros, but I bought it for $80 from the secondhand market. Not only is this a pocket pen, but it has a titanium flex nib, which you can see here. Because this nib is not currently available on the Gravitas site, I am not really sure if this increases the price of the pen. Usually flex nibs do, so I would assume that it does, but I'm not sure. This is my first time looking at this pen, so let's take a look at the filling mechanism. It looks like there's an empty cartridge in here. The body of the pen is in nice shape. I don't see any scratches or flaws at all, and I have heard that that can be a problem with these pens when you post them because it's basically metal on metal. It has a nice flat section to help with rolling. As far as turns to uncap, it looks like about 1.5. The cap posts, but it doesn't seem super secure unless you really jam it on the back, which I don't really want to do because of the scratching issue. The weight of the pen is quite balanced when posted though, and because of the size, you would probably want to post it. This is the description from the website. The pocket pen is designed to be ultra portable and tough. The pen is light, easy to use with a weighted section. The cap threads are triple starts, so the cap will come off in 1.5 turns with one side machined flat to act as a roll stop. Delicately bead blasted, leaving the surface smooth to the touch before it is anodized. The finish is really nice. It's smooth without being overly shiny or something that would attract fingerprints or scratches. Flat spot of the pen does a pretty good job of keeping the pen in one place when you put it on the desk, and it looks really nice. Here is a Kaweco Sport for comparison, since this is also a pocket pen, and you can see that they're almost the same size, but let's actually get some measurements. The Gravitas is 102.6 millimeters closed, or 4.04 inches. The Sport closed is slightly longer at 105.2 millimeters or 4.14 inches. The cap of the Gravitas is 73.2 millimeters or 2.88 inches, while the Sport's cap is a bit shorter at 70 millimeters or 2.75 inches. The Gravitas is longer when posted, and some of that is due to the larger nib size. It measures 139.6 millimeters posted or 5.49 inches, while the Sport is shorter at 126.9 millimeters or 4.99 inches. Unposted, both pens are probably shorter than most would feel comfortable writing with. The Gravitas is 98.1 millimeters or 3.86 inches, while the Sport is 99.7 millimeters or 3.92 inches. These measurements are fairly similar, but it's the grip section where there are the biggest differences, with the Gravitas measuring 10.2 millimeters at the narrowest or 11.5 millimeters at the widest. The Sport is narrower, being 9.4 millimeters at the narrowest and 9.7 millimeters at the widest. This slightly larger diameter of the Gravitas improves the comfort of writing with it. The fact that the grip section of the Gravitas is much longer also really improves comfort. The grip with threads measures 30.7 millimeters and without the threads 25.3 millimeters on the Gravitas. The Sport has a significantly shorter grip section measuring 20.3 millimeters with the threads and 16.3 millimeters without. The widest part of the body of the Gravitas is 16 millimeters, while the widest part of the body of the Sport is 13.1 millimeters. It should be noted here that the nib on the Sport is definitely a smaller nib size than the Gravitas. The Gravitas nib is produced by Gravitas, but it fits a Jovo number 6 thread, while the Sport is a number 5 size nib that uses a 060 Bach housing. Just to compare to a couple of other common pens, here are both the Gravitas and the Sport capped compared to a TWSBI Eco and a Lamy Safari. And here they all are posted. The measurements on Gravitas' site show the pen to be slightly longer than what I measure it to be. It's showing 105 millimeters capped and closed and 151 millimeters capped and posted. But I think I'll attribute that to the pointed finial making a length measurement a little bit difficult. They're close though. And now for some weights. The Gravitas is a heavy pen. You can tell that when you pick it up. The weight, including the cap, is 33.64 grams, while the plastic Sport is 11.19 grams. So the Gravitas is almost 3 times as heavy. And after weighing more of my pens, the pen that was closest in weight was this Hongdian N23. And it's also a metal pen, but it's not pocket-sized. So let's do some writing. When I went to fill this pen, I noticed that the empty cartridge that was included had a split at the neck. And when I first did testing, the only compatible cartridges that I had were from Faber Castel, and I didn't know how that ink would perform, but I did try a cartridge with the pen just because I really wanted to try it out. Since this first writing test, I have gotten a bottle of Serenity Blue that I'm using to test all my new pens with. And this prevents the unknowns of new inks and new pens. And I really wish I would have waited for this one, because using the ink cartridge of unknown ink with a pen that I wasn't familiar with really didn't tell me anything. The ink seemed dry and the pen seemed to railroad, but I had no idea if that was due to the pen or the ink or maybe both. I got a very general idea of how the pen worked and the amount of flex that was possible, but not a lot of very useful information. Looking back on this footage now, this writing sample might be the best that this pen has performed, but I'm guessing that is probably due to needing to push the ink into the feed to get the cartridge started, because I know later on in other writing samples with this same ink, there was a lot of railroading and issues. But unfortunately, that cartridge also split in almost the exact same way, and that ended up dumping about half of the ink into the barrel. To try to just get ink in this pen, I ordered a Kaweco Sport converter, and it looks like the neck of the converter might be a little more sturdy, but the capacity is just so small. And with a pocket pen, you want to be able to take it with you and use it. Because it's a flex pen, it uses more ink in general, and the capacity of these Sport converters is just so very small. It's just a bad combination, a flex pen with no ink capacity. I guess I could potentially look for a sturdier cartridge to refill or use, because a cartridge would hold more ink, but if the neck splits, that's just a mess. So, as far as the actual writing goes, the titanium flex nib is interesting to me. It seems to like a lower angle than I normally write with, and it also seems to want more pressure than the steel flex pens that I have now. While this could mean that the pen is capable of more pressure in general, it's also more tiring to use the flex. As you can see with this fast writing sample, the pen does okay when you aren't flexing it too much, and you can hear that there's a decent amount of feedback. The writing is smooth overall, and the nib doesn't catch or skip. All of the writing issues really seem to be due to the ink flow. I also tried about 5 or more different inks in the pen before I used the Serenity Blue, and I had a lot of railroading with all of them, even ones that I don't consider to be that dry. I even had railroading issues with the Serenity Blue, but it did seem to be a little less frequent. The way it stands right now, this pen needs the wettest ink that you have to flex properly, and even then, I'm not sure that it will perform without railroading issues. At some point, I might try to adjust the feed to increase the ink flow, but I want to try maybe a few more inks in it first. When the ink is cooperating, it writes well and it has a fun amount of flex, but unfortunately, it doesn't stay writing well for long before I need to push more ink into the feed to make it catch up. The feed is just not keeping up with the flex. To compare the amount of flex I can get with this pen, I'll write with a Fountain Pen Revolution Jaipur version 2 pen with a number 6 nib and a Fountain Pen Revolution Guru pen with a 5.5 size nib. You can really see the railroading issues when I try to get a flex sample. If I slow down a ridiculous amount, I can get some ink flow, but it's just not really that fun to write with. When I can get it to flex, it looks like the amount of flex is close to what I can get with a 5.5 Fountain Pen Revolution pen. The number 6 Fountain Pen Revolution pen has more flex, and both Fountain Pen Revolution pens were able to keep up with the ink flow demands of a flex pen much better than the Gravitas. So, final thoughts. The pros. The build quality is excellent. The pen is clearly well made and sturdy. I mean, it's just a tank. Another thing is the pen is more comfortable to write with than a Sport, and it's essentially the same size. The pen is well balanced when posted, when the cap stays on, and I do like the style of the pen. The lines are clean and it's very machined looking, and the logo is engraved into the body of the pen, and the flat side is useful, and the finish is very nice. Some cons about the pen. Railroading. The pen can't keep up with the ink demands, and that's a real issue for me. The posting is rather unstable. It feels like the cap isn't really secure on there, and sometimes it'll pop off while I'm writing unless it's really jammed on there. The ink capacity is just too small for a flex pen if I am using this Sport converter. The Sport converter is tiny. If I could get an empty cartridge to work in the pen without splitting, that would probably help, but I also don't want to have ink dumped into the barrel of the pen from a split. I probably have to acknowledge customer service issues. This isn't something I've personally experienced since I got my pen from the secondhand market. There have historically been reports of issues with ordering Gravitas pens directly from the website, which the owner, Ben, has acknowledged. The general opinion is that the build quality of the pens is excellent, but the order fulfillment and communication with customers is lacking overall. Ben is partnering with Pen Ventures for the logistical side of his business, which will hopefully help with these issues in the future. I'll put a link to the Gravitas and Pen Ventures partnership announcement in the corner and in the description. So, whenever I do a pen review video, I want to talk about why I bought the pen in the first place, because I always have very specific reasons that I buy pens. Usually, I try to get all of my pens on the secondhand market if I can. It's not always about price. It's about availability, or with resin pens or pens that have a pattern. When you order them new, you don't always get what you see in the picture, and I want to know what I'm getting. When this particular pen came up for sale, the reason I was interested is because I was interested in Gravitas, pens in general, because I'd heard good things about the build quality, but I didn't want to order a new one because I'd also heard not great things about communication. And then another reason was I didn't have any pocket pens when I bought this, and I wanted something in that specific form factor. I've gotten a few others since then, but at the time I didn't have any pocket-sized pens other than my vintage pen that I wouldn't carry around with me anyway. And then probably most importantly, the pen had a titanium flex nib, and I hadn't tried any titanium flex nibs, and I don't often see flex nibs on the secondhand market. It was new and it was interesting, and I tend to look for flex pens in general, or at least interesting nibs. I would have been a lot less likely to buy this pen. I probably wouldn't have bought it at all if it had just been fine, medium, or broad nib in it. And then the price was good, in my opinion. It was a nice shape. I did really like how the pen looked. So it checked off a lot of boxes for me. The lack of a pocket pen, and also the titanium flex nib, and the brand. I've lived with the pen for a couple of months now. I think I got it in early March, and I've probably put 8 or more inks through it, and it's had issues with every single one. None of the inks I've tried have given me what I would call a pleasant writing experience, where I can just pick the pen up, write for a reasonable length of time, and put the pen down and go about my business. I always have to end up priming the feed in order to get the ink flow to catch up to the flex. And with the Kaweco Sport converters, that's a plunger mechanism, and those can get messy, though they are easier to plunge than some of the other plunger converters that I've used. The only difference has been with some inks, I can write a little bit longer before I have to do that. So some inks do better than others, but they all railroad eventually. And then all of the cons that I mentioned previously are still an issue after a few months. So I guess the question is, do I regret buying it, and do I plan on keeping it? I don't regret buying it. Leaving the flex nib out of the picture altogether, I feel like this was a decent price for this pen, and the actual body of the pen is really nice. I don't know that it will stay a flex pen for much longer if I can't get the railroading figured out. I like how the pen feels in my hand, and the balance and the build quality, but the nib is not working. It could be an issue with the feed, and I may try to widen the ink channel to see if that helps. But if I can't figure out that issue soon, I see a different nib in this pen's future. And luckily, it's a number 6 pen. It'd be very easy to swap out if that ends up being the case. Keep in mind, though, that this actual flex nib hasn't been available on the Gravitas site for a little while from what I can see. So it's possible that maybe they're modifying it after feedback. I might also have a nib meister look at it at some point. I won't get rid of the nib, but I don't know that I will keep it on this pen. I may also just try the nib on one of my other number 6, maybe Fountain Pen Revolution pens, and see what happens. Anyway, I think that about wraps it up. I hope you found this pen review useful. Since this is my first pen review, please let me know if I didn't cover something that you look for when watching reviews so I can include it in my next review video. And thanks again for stopping by. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.